Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh. Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome to the James MacTaggart Memorial Lecture for 2024. I am Fatima Salaria, the Executive Chair the Executive Chair of the Edinburgh TV Festival and the TV Foundation. And I am absolutely over the moon to see you all here today. In just a moment, you will be hearing from our advisory chair for this year, Harjeet, who's joined forces with me, our amazing CEO, the incredibly patient Campbell Glennie, and our outstanding new creative director, Rowan Woods, who is doing this for the first time this year. So just a little bit about the festival and why this is such a unique charity and why I am so proud to be the chair of this organisation. Every penny that goes from the passes and the partnerships that you guys buy go directly into our programmes and our initiatives, ensuring that they remain free and accessible for those who need them the most. So, this year, through initiatives like The Network, Ones to Watch, TV PhD, we will be supporting, New Voices and Reconnect. We will be directly supporting over 100 beneficiaries from all corners of the UK's TV landscape. That's not to mention the hundreds more who are going to benefit from the subsidised passes for freelancers and those with access needs. So when you bought your pass, you weren't just gaining access to this fantastic festival, you were helping make our industry, our beloved industry, a fairer and more inclusive place to work. And for that, I sincerely thank you. I want to say a huge and special warm welcome to all of our international delegates, and especially our cohorts of creatives from Melbourne in Australia. And a huge thank you to our headline supporters, Screen Scotland, whose contributions are absolutely vital to everything we do. So this year, our industry has been tested once again. Was there ever a time when the chair of Edinburgh could stand here and reflect on a period of unmatched growth and job satisfaction? If so, those days are sadly long gone, as Ros Atkins explained to us this morning in that opening debate. We've faced a slowdown in work. We have faced job losses and a lack of advertising spend. But the challenges go even deeper for many of us. This year, some of us in this industry have felt marginalised simply because of our religion or the colour of our skin. Jewish and Muslim colleagues have felt pretty desperate at times, knowing that standing up for those who can antagonise others is an issue. Surely, no matter what happens outside of our industry, we owe it to those who work inside this industry to be supportive and understanding. When Black Lives Matter surged, our industry took a knee, both physically and metaphorically, acknowledging the need for change. Now we must continue the process to heal these wounds that have been exposed once again. It is so important now more than ever to ensure that we are representing all voices and stories, because our combined strength is truly found in our diversity and our inclusivity. Yet even in these challenging times, TV culture can continue to shine brightly. And as we gather here tonight, we acknowledge the financial and the cultural hurdles we face, but we also share a deep confidence that our collective creativity and our talent will guide us through. Our community consistently produces world-class shows that captivate global audiences and win countless awards. Our resilience, our innovation remains our greatest strengths, and I know that this will all carry us into a brighter future. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our advisory chair this year, Harjeet Chokka. Harjeet started out 22 years ago as a BBC production trainee and has since built an impressive career working on some of the biggest unscripted shows in TV. Wife Swap, Educating, One Born, Secret Life of Five-Year-Olds and Ambulance. He's now a commissioning editor first at Channel 4 and now at Amazon, where he's worked on everything from Clarkson's Farm, All or Nothing, to docs like 99 and Sven, which is launching this week, by the way. I first met Harjeet while I was working at the Channel 4 commissioning team, and we were interviewing him for the role of Leeds-based commissioning editor in Factual. He really stood out. Fresh ideas, he had this down-to-earth personality. And afterwards, after the interview, he gave me a call. He was worried that he hadn't done his best, and he apologised for that. And he was wondering whether or not he was really cut out for this job. Like many of us, these stories aren't unfamiliar. Harjeet struggled with the belief that he wasn't good enough to work in the TV industry because he didn't have the confidence, the means, or the entitlement to succeed. But let me tell you, Harjeet's leadership style, kind, thoughtful, and always focused on strengthening our industry, has been nothing short of inspiring. His dedication, his innovative spirit, his charm have been instrumental in curating this year's festival lineup. Thanks to all of his efforts and the amazing members of our advisory committee who do all of this work for free, by the way, he has produced an extraordinary lineup featuring will.i.am, Andy Willman, Jack Rook, and Carol Vorderman. So now let us give a huge, warm Edinburgh welcome to the stage, Harjeet Chokka.
I was so scared I was going to fall over those stairs, so already we're winning, right? Thank you, Fatima, for your very kind words. Actually, when I was told that I'd be introducing the MacTaggart today, Fatima gave me two pieces of advice. The first was, and I quote, "Listen, fella, everyone has come to hear James, so be on stage for 2 minutes and get off." To which I replied, "Fatima, you can't expect a Punjabi man to buy a new suit and be on stage for 2 minutes." I've just seen Campbell gulp, so I will be quick-ish. It's been an incredible honour to be this year's advisory chair and to deliver this festival to you. However, despite what many male TV execs will tell you, no one man ever delivers a programme. And I have been blessed with a team that have worked tirelessly. I'll let you roll. Come on. I've been blessed with a team who have worked tirelessly to deliver this festival to you all. From the in-house team who have worked day and night to ensure this week runs smoothly, to our brilliant advisory committee who have really grappled with the themes and the purpose of this week's festival and has pulled as many strings as possible to deliver the sessions to you all. And what a festival we have. Already we've had the brilliant opening session, which I think really set the sort of where we move forward. We've had an intelligent and sobering conversation about reporting on Gaza, and kudos to the festival for having the guts to stage that. And hearing from legends like Warren Littlefield and my future best friend, Sarah Phelps. And we have so much more to come, including an honest and timely examination of what it means to be Muslim in this industry, both on and off screen. We have an important discussion on class, which is going to be moderated by Billy Piper. Jokes. I mean Sam McAllister, obviously. And last but by no means least, we have the one and only Carol Vorderman delivering the alternative MacTaggart. Be afraid. Be very afraid. I do want to say thank you to three key individuals, though. To Campbell, our inspirational CEO. Campbell, you are a rare leader because you empower your team and you let them shine. You are generous with your time and you're a decent bloke as well. To Fatima, the festival executive chair. I don't think there are any adjectives left, Fatima, for me to use to describe what a wonderful human being you are. So I will steal a quote, which is, "What use is a hero if they are not kind? And you are my hero because you are kind." And to Rowan, the creative director of the festival and my partner in crime. It's your first year, Rowan, and you smashed it. You are a dedicated, passionate, hard-working individual, and I feel really lucky to have worked with you these last few months. And in danger of sounding like an eliminated Strictly contestant, I know I have a friend for life. And that brings me neatly to Fatima's second piece of advice, which was, whatever you say, fella, say it from the heart. I love TV. I genuinely love it. From Saturday night dancing shows to box set dramas, to gripping documentaries, to sitcoms. TV has been a huge part of my life. I genuinely believe it has the power to be a force for good, and, to paraphrase Stephen Knight, the glue that binds us all together. But TV is not perfect, and it has been a really tough year, as we have discussed a lot. Many of our brothers and sisters are disillusioned. They have no job security and are disheartened. Commissions are harder to come by, and there's less money going round. And we are not looking after each other as much as we should be, nor are we catering for our viewers with content that truly reflects their lives. And it was with these issues that I want to talk directly to three groups of people: the ones to watch, reconnect, and the network. This industry we love so much rests with you guys, and it's up to you to make it stronger, better, more compassionate. TV isn't about chasing titles or status. It's a privilege to make programs, so make them with passion, conviction, and belief. But also, more importantly, be kind to each other. You now have an everlasting peer group. Support each other and look after each other. When one of you has success, celebrate it like it's yours. But equally, when one of you falls, pick them up and get them back on their feet. TV is about raising the bar and pushing those boundaries, and it's the only way we will ever ensure its survival and keep our most important stakeholder, the viewer, engaged. When Rowan and I first talked about who would deliver our MacTaggart lecture and who would be courageous enough to talk about class and do it with wit and confidence, there was only one person on our list, James Graham. It is a testimony to the respect and admiration James has within the TV industry that there are this many people crammed into this massive room. In fact, I think the only other two words that could get this many television execs into a room this big, this quickly, are the words free and bar. To state that James is prolific is an understatement. This year alone, he will have delivered, This year alone, he will have had the following work on stage or screen: Dear England, The Way, Punch, Boys from the Black Stuff, Tammy Faye, and the excellent Sherwood returns to the BBC this coming Sunday. It's now fact that you are only ever 8 meters away from a piece of James Graham's work. He is considered one of Britain's most prominent and celebrated dramatists, and while his work can take on knotty subjects like the miners' strikes, spy cops, Brexit, he also captures the complexities of human relationships like no one other. The scene in the first series of Sherwood, where Cathy and Julie are talking to each other with a metaphorical and literal wall between them, is so beautifully written and staged that it lasts with you forever. The characters he creates and the words they utter speak directly to the viewers and touch their lives. He's also a lovely man to boot, and those of you who heard his Desert Island discs know he has excellent taste in music. When Rowan and I met James to talk through our vision for the festival, he instantly got it. All three of us share a belief that TV is a powerful cultural force, but with this comes responsibility Rowan and I feel really lucky that he agreed to do it, and honestly, guys, you are in for a treat. So any road, it's my absolute pleasure, joy, privilege, and delight to introduce the 2024 James MacTaggart Lecture, James Graham.
Thank you, and good evening. One of the many pleasures in being given the honour of presenting the MacTaggart to you all is that you find yourself compelled to trawl back over the many inspiring lectures given by the many wonderful speakers who have stood here in recent years. And if you do, you'll notice, like me, a common and often typically British pattern to the many opening remarks. A mild sort of bewilderment at being asked, a sense of imposter syndrome, and some fear, despite the obvious privilege of being asked. Well, as a writer, I believe we should always aspire to being original, to break new ground, and be daring in our choices. So let me say to you that I think the festival organisers have made exactly the right choice this year. It's about fucking time, and I have absolutely no doubts about the merits of me being here. If only that were true. But for those who don't me, and why should you, I am a dramatist. In other words, a professional liar. And the privilege of being a dramatist is you get to invent characters who might have the confidence, the charisma, and the charm that you never managed to exhibit yourself in public, but that is what I'm going to try and manifest in myself today. Because indeed, this is an honour, and I am mildly bewildered to be here, but also really grateful. I was taught by my mum, my working class mum, from a very young age, that when you get invited somewhere, you should always, always say, thank you for having me. There might have been an element of class insecurity there, and we're going to talk about everyone's least favourite diversity and representation category, class, quite a lot today. It's a key theme of this year's festival. But growing up, my family's somewhat obsessive thank you for having me riff most likely came from an anxiety that maybe many people from a particular kind of, say, aspirational working class background had, pertinent to the topic under discussion today about belonging, about getting above your station, about where your place is. For such families, the only thing worse than feeling excluded, the only thing more distressing than not being invited somewhere, was to actually get invited somewhere, and that was really stressful. And much of what we knew as a family about social rituals and protocols would have come from television. It was our window into the world beyond my mining village in North Nottinghamshire. And coming from such a place, I know I wouldn't be a writer today without two things. The fact that my comprehensive school made absolutely no apology in foregrounding art subjects for majority working class or benefit class kids in a socio-economically deprived area, and because of just all the truly high quality, inspiring, representative television that I watched growing up, long before I ever sat in a theatre, a cinema, or an opera house. Telly, with a myriad of complex and contradictory working class regional voices, characters and experiences that enthralled and enriched me. I thought the whole world was full of people who spoke like and thought like and felt like my family. I'm not quite sure the same can entirely be said now, with, of course, some great exceptions. TV was everything to me. We were that family who ate every meal on our lap, on a tray, in front of the telly, even Sunday lunch, because Sunday lunch was the EastEnders omnibus. There you go. And only Easter Sunday and Christmas Day was reserved for the table. But TV dramas and soaps were my formative, emotional, social, political introductions. I can still hear the crack of the back of Tiffany Mitchell's head as it hit the curb outside the Queen Vic on New Year's Eve in the snow, and what it felt like to squeeze my mum on the sofa as Christopher Eccleston crawled, bleeding, out of Robert Carlyle's house after being stabbed in Cracker. I can see the pain in Helen Daniels' eyes in Neighbours as a road rage driver yelled at her about her age and bad driving. And in that moment, as an 8-year-old boy, realizing suddenly that one day we would all get old and we would all die. I remember seeing my first gay kiss on Corrie and watching Jeremy Brett's Sherlock Holmes tumble over the side of the Rickenback Falls, arm in arm with Eric Porter's Moriarty. And while my dad and siblings screamed in shock, I nodded to myself sagely on the sofa, understanding even then as a 10-year-old how the antagonist souls had become so inextricably linked that if one could not live, then neither could live. I was a pretty shy and introverted kid, with some flamboyant exceptions. I really did actually find it quite exhausting to be around real people and preferred made-up ones instead, like training wheels before you get out the real thing. Glued to the TV or hiding in my room where, from about the age of 4 or 5, I began to write my own stories. But on those infuriating occasions when I would get sent off to perhaps a more well-to-do friend's house, it had been so drilled into me to express gratitude that I wouldn't even wait to say it, wait till the event was over to say thank you for having me. I'd just blurt it out as soon as they opened the door and let me in. Thank you for having me. Some rituals and phrases picked up from TV were also often clumsily misapplied. My family still talk about the time when I stood on my doorstep with my mum, waving off one of her work friends who'd been round, cheerfully yelling at her, "Good riddance," having just heard that phrase the night before on the telly. It's not that we weren't proud or that we felt we were any less deserving, but so embedded are those habits, that learning, that to this day I can barely leave anywhere without saying it. The landlord of the pub I watched the Euros in as I left. Thank you for having me. A theatre as I exit the auditorium, passing by the ushers, even after watching one of my own shows. Thank you for having me. Even on those rare occasions, very rare, when you may have got together with someone after a night out, and there it is, the morning after. The awkward goodbye made even more awkward with the unintended double entendre. Thank you for having me. But my point is, and I do have a point, I promise, is that this goes to a challenge we face, the one of definition, defining class in Britain, and how it might still affect your ambition or limit your opportunities in this industry or in any industry. How someone's socio-economic background is not, and this is something I really believe, and yet I'm often challenged on it, is not simply the financial circumstances you grew up in or the labour of your parents. It is a culture, similar to that of growing up in a particular faith or nationality or ethnicity, all of which, of course, always cross over and intersect with social class as well. It's not just about money. You do not stop being it the second you get a pay rise, nor would I offer, and I'm sorry if this sounds exclusionary or gatekeepery, but nor do you become it the instant you drop below a certain level, because it is a culture and the cultural reference points you grow up with. A mindset you might develop, never universal, never one size fits all, but shared outlooks, learnt behaviours. And yet, we are squeamish about it, about defining it, and as a result, we quite often still exclude it from industry measurements around diversity. And I would love to talk about how we might collectively make progress on that front. In addition to that, I'm aware I said yes to delivering this lecture when I assumed we were approaching the end of something, the last days and weeks of an old government, a dying regime. Instead, I find myself at the beginning of something else. This might not seem significant, but as a writer, I'm all about structure. And planning for Act 5, and yet finding yourself in Act 1 is no small matter. But in many ways, I am actually thankful. Looking backwards ruefully, even angrily, might be more fun, but less fruitful than looking forward, to imagining what we could do, how to use this moment, any moment of potential change. So I'll be speaking a bit about how the new government should allow culture to play an active part in this promised national renewal, not just kept at arm's length in its own silo on the peripheries of policymaking, as it so often is. TV production, cinema, live arts, comedy, music, stories can benefit areas that range from levelling up to placemaking, health, social care, social mobility, education, mental health, economic growth, and the attempts to repair our frayed social fabric. Speaking of the nation, I want to celebrate the power of television as a collective experience, something that we still can share as an event, and to challenge this false narrative that such a phenomenon is either guaranteed to die out or that there is no appetite for it, especially in this Olympic and Euros year of all years, to make the case for the social and political and even spiritual function of collective TV experiences, and why we therefore need to make stronger arguments for them and to fight for keeping them in the more fragmented digital age. Just as we must for making dramas that translate real-life stories to the screen, particularly those with a political and social bent. In this year of all years, when an ITV real-life inspired drama changed the literal law of the land. It's an area that I've been lucky enough to write and make work in myself, on stage and screen, covering topics such as the EU referendum in Brexit, the Uncivil War, or the coughing major quiz show scandal in Quiz, and some tragic killings in my own local community in Sherwood. And a forthcoming TV adaptation of Gareth Southgate's reformation of the men's football team in dear England, which I can now finally start, now that it has finally ended. But such work does carry its own inherent headaches and risks, moral and legal. But we must take those risks. Our audiences really want us to. And that means a look at how we fight, again, for our public service broadcasters in the modern age. I'm determined to be hopeful, excited, solution-focused in these rare moments of transition, but to the miserable stuff first. 8%. 8% of people working in television from a working class background. As part of the recent survey, many of you will have seen released this year to Channel 4 News from the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Centre, that compares with the between 46 to 49% of British people who identify as working class, so almost half the population, but only 8% of them working in our field. That's across the entire field. In leadership roles, it will be even lower. 8% bringing their experiences, outlook, stories, culture to a platform that is meant to reflect all those things back to us. That is the lowest percentage of people from lower socio-economic backgrounds in television in at least a decade, likely longer. And I know that it feels like this "where are the working classes" question comes up often, doesn't it? Every couple of years, not necessarily part of a united or sustained campaign as other areas of underrepresentation have benefited from. It's more a recurrent headline expressed by an actor or a writer in an interview with a tinge of helplessness and inevitability about it. But we arrive here, worse today than we were 10, 15 more years ago. Maybe worse than it's ever been. Why? Of course, right now, so many of us are struggling, as was mentioned earlier. I know that, and you know that. These are incredibly difficult times for creative and crews, but also for producers, for broadcasters, the employers, as well as the employees. Ad revenue is down, costs are up. Production has been contracting significantly since last year's festival. Peak TV having peaked, this now the trough. That depressing mantra of survive until 25. Not even to thrive, but for many of us simply to be hoping to be here next time. And it's hardest of all for freelancers. I am a freelancer, a proud one, a really lucky one, but two-thirds of freelancers, when asked by Bectu in a poll at the beginning of the year, were out of work, waiting, hoping for green lights for productions to start up again. 75% of those polled were struggling with their mental health as a result. And really shockingly and upsettingly, that figure amongst our youngest workers in our sector rises to an unbearable 90%. That's 9 out of 10 of every person under the age of 24 in our profession struggling to cope mentally and emotionally. Speaking to many of my fellow writers, their mood now ranges from frustration to panic, as many are in limbo, struggling to get anything away. And this is leading to, as we know, many in their thousands leaving the industry. And as ever, most of those will be from those minority and underrepresented sections of the workforce who simply don't have the reserve to keep going in difficult times, exacerbating further the problems with regards to class. So what do we do? What do we do to avoid these cycles of boom and bust? 2 years ago, overproduction. Not enough crew to fill all the jobs, spending tens of millions sometimes on high-budget shows, some of them which then don't even get released. It's grotesque, a grotesque thought. All that money and talented people's time, and it gets buried, an audience not even able to see it. To now, a drought, a desert. So this climate of extremes, maybe at some point we can interrogate how it's even possible for an industry that is manufacturing one of the most in-demand products on earth, content, entertainment, stories, how it's possible to have drifted into a global business model where so few are able to make money from something that's never been in higher demand. But that is beyond my pay grade, so I'll go back to more comfortable territory, wanging on about class. But only briefly, I promise. That was an instinct for me to write that and say that. But I've no doubt a misplaced one, but I kept it in as I think it shows I feel both somewhat presumptuous but slightly guilty talking about this, that old "thank you for having me" again, which I think comes down to a number of factors. One is that we have made leaps forward in representation, courtesy of the passion, the time, and the effort of so many people in this room. The chronic underrepresentation of those from ethnic minority backgrounds on and behind the screen has increased by 15% in the past few years. Representation of LGBTQ+ people and characters has increased too. Those who identify as disabled have seen a slower rate of increase at only 1.1%. But advocates like Jack Thorne and Rose Ayling-Ellis are identifying it, fighting for it, and making gains in it. Whether any of these statistical increases come with real power and agency, whether those representations are positive, authentic, is of course another matter. But it's important to identify progress when it occurs, as it motivates the belief that more is possible. Secondly, I could be wrong, but compared to other areas of underrepresentation, when it comes to class, I feel like we sometimes just don't feel it as much in our bones. It might be that British embarrassment over money thing, we're uncomfortable, whereas other, more often visible, sometimes simpler to define areas of diversity fire up the activist in us. The fight seems purer, the target real. How to define it then, class? Richard Osman once offered one of the most enjoyable and I think most rigorous metrics as being the time that you open your presents on Christmas Day. So the earlier you are, the more working class you are. I am proud to say that my family were as soon as you woke up and we had stuck that kettle on, those presents were opened. The closer you got to lunch, the more middle class you become. And my God, once you hit the evening, we're talking baronets and earls. It may also come from the third and final reason for some of my guilt, imagining that many of you are sitting there and thinking, is this fucker really working class? Like, is he really? Does he sound working class? Can you be working class if you've arrived at a point in your life when you're giving the MacTaggart Memorial Lecture? I'm not mocking the question. I think it's a fair, revealing, and necessary question. We have a suspicion, a prejudice, don't we, based on countless examples of maybe some folks claiming to be from a working class background, only to discover that might not quite be so simple. How much did we all really enjoy David Beckham teasing Victoria in the great Netflix documentary over her dad's Rolls Royce? I did. It was brilliant. And I loved them both for that, actually, sort of naming and enjoying naming the thing. We have an inbuilt alarm bell when it comes, an innate bullshit detector, especially when, elephant in the room, it comes to white men waving a diversity flag, which I suggest is correct. A necessary cynicism born out of evidence. Nevertheless, this question of proof. You're never required to prove, say, your gayness or your blackness, or, God, I hope this is true, your disability once declared. It's believed and recognised. So here goes, just for the record, my working class bona fides and a little of my journey. Parents' profession. My mum's jobs have included a barmaid in our local pubs and working men's clubs, and until recently, a primary school receptionist in the day, packing boxes in a logistics warehouse at night. My father worked in local government in Nottingham City Council in conveyancing. Oof, that sounds quite dicey, doesn't it? That sounds very lower middle or upper working. But hold on. My parents divorced when I was young, and I technically live with a single mum, so phew, we're back on track. My stepdad was the local window cleaner, one of my first ever jobs, cleaning the mining terraces in an area of significant deprivation, that red wall you all keep hearing about. I was state school educated at a comprehensive, like 93% of the country. 93%. Whereas, and figures can vary, but in many parts of the cultural sector, sometimes only 22% of the workforce went to a state school. I was the first in my family to go to a university in Hull to study drama. The government paid for my fees. Thank you for having me. And my jobs have included the same warehouse as my mum or night shifts in a plastics factory. After my degree, I was the stage doorkeeper at the Nottingham Theatre Royal, which I loved, seeing the touring shows pass in and out, and later jobs in theatre marketing once I moved to London to pursue my dream of being a playwright. Sleeping on friends' floors and working in call centres and bars while I wrote and started to slowly get my plays out for free at fringe venues and pub theatres as my journey, thankfully and gloriously, began. However, there is not one homogeneous working class experience. Indeed, if you're, say, a black working class female writer from anywhere outside of the southeast of England, you're about as unrepresented a figure as you can be. And I was incredibly lucky in many ways. To the best of my awareness at the time, I was never hungry. I didn't particularly notice going without, although I knew there were luxury things we couldn't have. I had holidays, sometimes in a caravan on a camping site in the same town where we lived, but sometimes here to Scotland, and sometimes my parents saved up and we went abroad. A lot of my wider family, cousins, uncles, aunts, were benefit class in social housing. They thought of us, quite frankly, as quite posh and having airs and graces. Yes, I had to share a room often on a bunk bed, but I had quiet to do my homework in, and statistically, most crucially, books in the house to read. And I loved to read them. The stratas of class are varied and vast. But that doesn't mean we can any longer fail to find a way to make them as equal a marker of diversity and inclusion in the monitoring of our employment practices, in our targets for commissioning and grants, and in our awards. And sigh, yes, I know awards are not the be-all and end-all, but they are a symbol, and there's often a telling anomalies here. BAFTA, who have become brilliant industry leaders in this area, set out their new diversity standards in 2020, following the visible lack of diversity in both its membership and in the nominations and awards. Their aim for 2025 included specific targets for gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and disability. At the time, these did not include class. However, as of last autumn, this has been addressed, with BAFTA offering new resources and schemes to help organisations become more class-aware. What we need, though, I feel, is a proper industry-wide standard and a plan. When I completed my last 3 diversity monitoring forms following a wrap on a production, I was asked for my race, gender, sexuality and disability status on all of them. On only one of them did it ask for my parents' occupation. On jury panels, many of you will have been on them, there is no requirement or formal mechanism in place for the panel to raise and consider the social class of any of the artists or creatives involved. And even if, at the chair's discretion, it is raised as an aspiration, where is the data or the evidence to know which nominees identify as what? How would the jurors know that, given that class neither has any obvious visible indicators or is a protected characteristic to declare? When me or my colleagues' work has been gratefully nominated for various awards, there's no way of them knowing mine or any of my actors or the director's class. They often haven't asked us, nor, to be fair, have we found a way to tell them. And when you factor into all of this that working class audience have been measured to be the demographic which consume the most hours of television, linear and SVODs, these are anomalies, are they not? It is a category of representation with the largest disparity between makeup of the country and makeup of our industry. Yet it is often the only significant category not to be formally included in most of our standard measurements of diversity. They are the largest potential audience to reach for the content that we make, yet they are the demographic least able to find a foothold in the industry to bring their experiences and their stories to make that work in an environment that makes them feel safe. Why is this? Don't we care? Of course we care. But what? Just not as much as we can measure the unforgivable underrepresentations elsewhere. This has got me thinking. If I got my wish, my desire for a box to suddenly appear on all the forms, all the submissions I make, which box would I tick? Because, behold, yet another insecurity, another dilemma in this area. Am I still working class? Does my job now, my income, do the stars in your reviews or how many times you pop up in the Today programme change your class? Truthfully, I wouldn't be able to stomach or frankly bear the eye rolling I'd get if I dared to suggest I belonged to that class now. And herein lies, I think, a key problem and also a slight sadness. I meant it when I said that class isn't just money, the jobs that your parents had. It's part of what forged you. In other words, a key part of your coding, your morality, your sense of self, which creates a philosophical quandary. In no other part of your identity do you become less yourself as your circumstances change. Society rightly doesn't demand that you become less Christian or less Muslim, depending on how your work is going. You don't become less black or white or less gay or bi or straight, have less Latin American or Southeast Asian heritage, depending on how your last projects went. All of the brilliant facets of you that make up you, that you proudly carry with you. It's only the class part of our DNA that is demanded we must lose as our circumstances change, despite how fundamental it is to who you are. Does that matter? Really? Boo-hoo, first world problems? I do get that. Except, of course, that means we have this strange feedback loop, whereby the call rightly goes out periodically, where are all the working class writers? Why aren't there any? And then some working class writers emerge, early career, and they are championed. And then they start to do well. Too well. So then our slightly snidey, sneery, are you really though, culture kicks in and goes, well, you can't say you're working class now, sorry. And then they look around and go, wait, where are all the working class writers? There aren't any. And so the depressing headlines come out again, and the hopelessness sinks in for that kid in his flat in Merseyside that tells them they shouldn't bother. Brass tacks then. How would a commissioning editor, how would a casting agent, how would an arts council officer, a BAFTA panel judge know and trust that anyone is working class? I am not, I promise, imagining some nightmarish Orwellian panel where me and Julie Walters and Lenny Henry sit behind a long table while we ask you to do your best Lambeth walk. But a few of us have actually wrestled with some of this in the theatre industry some time ago. I was a proud patron of a group called Common that tried to bring together working class creatives into a network that could provide mentoring, campaigning, and at one point aspired to build some sort of database, naive as that might sound, a working class spotlight of sorts that could be a resource for producers and employees and funders to search for, say, a working class choreographer or a working class intimacy coordinator, if that was the desire for a particular project. We managed to raise funds and into the tens of thousands, and work began on building such an online base, but due to a myriad of the usual factors exacerbated by the impacts of COVID on freelancers, pressures on that group saw it disband and the monies returned. But a joined-up approach is still needed, and I would welcome the resources and expertise of those in the television and film industry to help get the funding to build something and keep it running as a statement of intent towards change as much as a genuinely valuable resource. And it gives me great pleasure then to say that the TV Foundation, the charity which owns the Edinburgh Television Festival, agree and will be an organising force behind such an endeavour, dovetailing with work that they've already undertaken. There will be an announcement going out after this lecture about that launch. I'm keen that any such conversation feels inclusive and kind, recognising that those in our sector who come from more privileged backgrounds and don't choose the class they're from any more than those who from less privileged backgrounds. This is simply about equity of opportunity and a refusal to believe that this is the one area in unfair, unjust underrepresentation that we simply cannot and will not crack. It must be cracked. And for the same reasons, we know the value of it being cracked in other areas. If you see a person or a character who looks like you or sounds like you on screen, whose experience or dilemmas or joy reflects your own, you feel more seen. There is a catharsis there for audiences, a validation, and an opening up of potential future creatives and workers of the psychological block that comes with even imagining such a job in the future in the first place. That was the greatest pleasure and my honour in writing Sherwood. Next episode out this Sunday. My BBC drama series made by House Productions, set in my hometown, inspired by some specific real-life tragedies and the more broader generational trauma and ongoing divisions that prevail coming out of the miners' strike and the collapse of our industrial heritage. These places, my home, are sometimes oversimplistically described as the left behind. But that feeling is real, feeling ignored and unseen. And there are so many potential stories and voices waiting to be unearthed, nurtured and encouraged that come from these communities that I've no doubt we are missing and have missed. It's painful and such a shame for us as creators as much as the audience. I was also incredibly grateful to have been included by the BBC, Charlotte Moore in particular, in discussions about scheduling as a writer. There was, of course, a discussion about whether to make the first series available all at one time on iPlayer rather than weekly. I am not against that freedom of choice for an audience. A good old binge works, I think, for some shows. But I also just really cherish those television experiences that stretch out, that demand that we wait, so that we can have actual, in real life, conversations that are generated around the work. Those infamous water cooler conversations the morning after, the night before. I really felt like that not only the twists and turns of Sherwood should be something we protect by teasing them out, so that a significant chunk of the audience were roughly following along about the same time, but also because of the social and political themes that we were deliberately structuring to unravel at certain moments. It meant that rather than an entire conversation around a piece happening only at the launch, the TX, and then abandoned thereafter, The national conversation around, say, levelling up, or spy cops, trade unions, industrial strikes, were spread across a series of many weeks, including articles, TV, radio, social media. And I was so grateful and so enjoyed all the watch-along blogs and articles and forums where week by week audiences engaged in theories and responses and reactions. Television as a collective experience, not just an atomized, lonely, private one. And still, to this day, as we know, millions of people will make the choice to discover who H is in Line of Duty or the fate of Catherine Kaywood in Happy Valley together at the same time when every opportunity to consume it on your own terms has been provided to you. I also wonder often about loneliness and social isolation as one of the most under-discussed scourges of modern society. Underreported, understandably, for a commentariat or political class who are often defined by being surrounded by people. But that box in the corner of the room, or laptop or phone, that in real time or on catch-up connects you to a wider community, a shared experience, a national conversation. We all remember the psychological necessity of that during lockdown. That's why, incidentally, for all of AI's so-called efficiencies and its very real threat to jobs, I actually have every faith that it will in fact be audiences that reject its encroachment into writing and creating content and art. Because the reason why you cry, weep at a Taylor Swift song, is that connectivity that comes with knowing that someone human has felt what you have felt, and so you feel less alone with your pain. Alan Bennett, another working class legend, said it best. Someone has always said it best. His line from the History Boys about reading or art in general, and I quote, "When you come across something, a thought, a feeling, a way of looking at things which you had thought special and particular to you, now here it is, set down by someone else, a person you have never met, someone who is maybe even long dead, and it as if a hand has come out and taken yours." AI cannot and will never be able to take hold of your hand. It will never feel quite the same. And we need to remind people of that. Because what is a nation except the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves? Those big national moments we share together where possible. The conversations we have. The genie is never going to be put back in the bottle of modern consuming habits, and I don't want it to be. We have potentially the best of all worlds, but only if we hold firm to the social and political values of fighting to keep some of those collective moments, the public service benefits, in a world where they could accidentally just slip away on a trend because the direction of travel seems inevitable, rather than something we can actually guide and be directed by us to gain the most amount of benefits. I was lucky enough to experience firsthand the benefits and direct impact that communal storytelling had on a left behind area. During Hull's City of Culture in 2017. It was the place I'd studied in and where I was invited back to write one of the pieces. This had been a port city decimated by the collapse of the fishing industry, a key part of its identity, its story, and a sense that nothing had arrived to replace it. That creates a kind of hopelessness and despair. I'm not, I hope, naive enough to believe that an influx of live music, dance, and exhibitions was a one-stop cure for all your social, economic, and philosophical ills. But a monitoring unit was established in the city during the year-long series of events to survey and measure the impacts on residents of art and culture, on their outlook, their feelings, partly to hopefully, finally, have a data set on hand for the inevitable, cyclical, never-ending fight to justify what tiny proportion of national spending that culture has. And it was a no-holds-barred, honest account for the tens of thousands of people questioned across the 12 months. For example, if the culture, as it was called, what's all this traffic for? Oh, it's the fucking culture again. If that was pissing you off, you were encouraged to say that, and people did say that. But self-esteem measurably improved amongst young people under the age of 18. Every single school child in the city got to experience or make at least one piece of art during the year. There was a notable uptick in pride of place from residents of any age, but particularly older ones, mental well-being and motivation to try new things. Even the smallest, seemingly innocuous fact of putting Hull on the BBC weather map, where it has thankfully stayed. thank you for having us, was the talk of the community at the time. People just really didn't think that anyone knew where they were. The plays, short films, spoken word, poems in civic spaces around the city weren't just sugar-coated propaganda either. They were often deep dives into local traumas and upsets and injustices, the legacy of the slave trade, of unemployment. This is because storytelling, as we know, isn't just a confection, a distraction on stage or screen. They can be mechanisms for exploring something, understanding something, and imagining a way out of something. That is the social, political, and spiritual function of drama, and has been for 2 millennia. Framing your experiences with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Human actions leading to human consequences, cause and effect. Walking in the shoes of those who you might disagree with. Generating empathy for experiences beyond your own. I tried to put words that would describe the necessity and the need for building new stories for ourselves in Sherwood. In the final episode of the first series, the wonderful Leslie Manville, her character is in a community meeting in the miners' welfare as people try to process what has just occurred. She laments their inability to move on from their past because even the language they use in that community to define themselves traps themselves. We are a former mining town. The place we live is a post-industrial one, an ex-manufacturing base. So forgive me for quoting my own line at you, but, quote, how are my grandkids expected to imagine a future for themselves where even the words we use to describe ourselves are about what we aren't anymore? What we aren't anymore, not what we could be. That's why I have been so inspired by the approach and subsequent psychological and cultural breakthroughs of Gareth Southgate in the men's England football team. Enough to put his mission on stage and now adapt it for the BBC. Gareth, like he's my mate, Mr. Southgate identified early on that the crisis faced by England, the football team, but I would argue more broadly, was a crisis of storytelling. The reason why these young men felt their national shirt sat heavier on their shoulders than any other nation was because they were trying to tell an old story, full of impossible expectations that didn't feel authentic to them anymore. He used that language to the players and to the press, my language as a playwright. We need to write a new story for England, he said. In big matches, it was all about controlling the narrative, not ignoring the past, but not being imprisoned by it. And we all saw it, the progress made, that liberation. I believe so much of the crisis we've been facing politically and socially in Britain over the past few years has been a crisis of storytelling. That paralysis and stagnation, feeling trapped in an old story and not having the ability, even the desire, the wherewithal, the skills to begin imagining a new one. How can we, when creativity and art subjects have been systematically stripped from the education system in England over the past 15 years? A reduction of nearly half of all drama teachers gone from those state schools since 2010. The slashing of hours devoted to music and dance. It's therefore so important that we all hold the new government to their pledge to restore creative subjects to the core curriculum. All of us here in television, not just the wider arts. I believe that we should even contribute as a sector to the dialogue around what a modern, inspiring, accessible and inclusive 21st century drama curriculum might look like, one that includes TV drama and documentaries as much as it does reading Shakespeare. It's all part of the same ecosystem. This city, Edinburgh, demonstrates that every summer. There is also a danger that a whole generation of young people are simply not introduced to long-form storytelling. As parents, I'm sure many of you experience the near impossibility of getting your kids to sit with you and watch something that isn't a 2-minute TikTok. Being able to concentrate on one thing in this distraction economy might be a skill and a joy that young people lose. Can the curriculum in any way, that great equalizer, encourage that development, not just to save our jobs for the future, but because we know the benefits of being able to invest in a long-form story, invest in the complexity and the humanity, the empathy they encourage and generate, which is so lacking on social media platforms. And as I say, encouraging the capacity for imagination that any nation, any society needs if it is to create its way out of its problems. Newness, in an age which increasingly sees nostalgia selling. New stories have to be at the heart of commissioning, scripted, non-scripted, factual, fictional, even in this most difficult climate where the temptation, and we're witnessing it, is to fall back on tried and tested IP, source material, adaptations, expanded universes. We need new universes, which means taking risks and seeing risk as a long-term investment in the future health of our sector. It's vital and demonstrates the need for public service broadcasting to make programming decisions beyond the commercial pressures that, understandably, other streamers and SVODs have to take. Not that Netflix, Amazon, the Disneys of this world and don't take those risks, invest in talent, strive for originality, have impassioned people working for them. The revelation of these modern platforms, to me, has been how inventive, how authored so much of the most popular and successful streaming drama has been. We all benefit from that. But if a case is to be made, and it has to be made, in this modern multi-platform environment for the BBC, alongside ITV and Channel 4 and Channel 5, then surely it is that. They are the state school equivalent, the equalising force, the subsidised national theatre equivalent of being given public funding to relieve some of the commercial pressures in order to take non-commercial decisions in finding and training and amplifying voices that on paper may not have an easy, wide audience yet, but one day will. Speak to any American screenwriters or program makers, and they are bewildered by our complacency over PSBs. They wish they had a BBC. We will miss them if they ever go. We must make sure they never go. We must find the language, the enthusiasm, to make the case for them, not just when they're under siege, but in the good times as well as the bad. That rhetoric, defund the BBC, the staple part of the new populism, I believe that it is partly a failure of storytelling again. In the noise of toxic stories in the modern-day culture wars, the pick-a-side society which makes a neutral BBC really vulnerable, what is the patriotic case to appeal to those voices? Don't they realise, for example, that without the BBC, we lose our competitive advantage over US markets? That not-for-profit means British stories set in British communities with British characters are protected by the licence fee, and we may disappear without it. And of course, within that, recognisable high-quality working-class stories with them. Their existence, working-class dramas, provably appeals in any argument to keeping a strong funded BBC. But how are we to find them, build them in this difficult climate? Where are the storytellers of the future going to come from, and the new stories? As you know, a lot of the arenas, the platforms and the training grounds that particularly working class voices built their muscles in are disappearing. Those long-running returning series or daytime dramas cut back or being cancelled. The all but near collapse of the single drama as an entity, where big is more economic than small and volume is praised over niche. It's single dramas where I got to train my television muscle 15 years ago and prove myself. I wonder what the modern equivalent is of those original singles, those plays for today, not too expensive to produce, but that found audiences because they were presented under a trusted umbrella, a recognisable brand. I recently got to work with Alan Bleasdale on adapting the seminal Boys from the Black Stuff for stage, something that would have been incomprehensible to that shy young lad who watched Jake's progress on the sofa with his mum as a young teen. He curated a format in the 90s known as Alan Bleasdale Presents, a series of single commissions for emerging writers to be given training, support, and ultimately a production. A springboard, meaning they were seen as less of a risk in the eyes of broadcasters and got to begin building a relationship with an audience. What might the 2025 equivalent be under the tutelage of Russell T Davies or Michaela Cole or Sarah Phelps or Tony Schumacher, who might curate and present a rotating series of work by new writers on linear television or online under a trusted banner? I don't know. I'm not a commissioner, but some of you are. And I know that your passion for work that is politically engaged and socially minded matches mine. And if that work tends to sit more in single TV films and the limited series, despite their lack of obvious or immediate commerciality, then we must fight for those. Those that shine a light on injustice, from the poverty of Cathy that come home 50 years ago to the post office scandal of today. And not just because it's the right thing to do or it makes us feel important as makers, but because audiences want work that engages with the society around them to face the world and not just escape it. I've spoken a lot about community and about storytelling, so I just wanted to leave you with an example. This year, as was mentioned, I wrote a play called Punch for my local Nottingham playhouse. It was the story of a young man who got into a fight on a night out and killed a stranger with one punch. He was jailed, but then went on a surprising journey with the parents of his victim on a restorative justice programme, one that completely turned his life around. He has since been through higher education, received a degree, and now works with young offenders himself. It's a story that demands a revolution of our justice system, but it sounds probably like quite a tough watch, right? Hard to get an audience. Not only did the show sell out its run in a majority working class community, but similar to my desire for television water cooler conversations around the work, we built a talking circle outside the theatre for many audience members who wanted to stay behind and chat about the themes of the play with strangers. Given the show finished at 10 o'clock and folk were wanting to get off, we thought 8 chairs would be enough. On a regular basis, 200 to 300 people would stick around after, craning to hear the speakers talk long into the night, delaying their journey home. Storytelling, on stage, on screen, and the conversations they generate. That shared sense of community, together or apart, they create. It has been the greatest pleasure to talk with you and raise some of those areas of concern today. I look forward to the ongoing conversations with you all, and of course, needless to say, thank you for having me. Thank you.